Let's practice multiplying integers and rational numbers together. For these first 4 problems, we're going to go ahead and write always positive, sometimes positive, or never positive for these statements. For number 1, we have the statement, a positive number multiplied by a positive number. This is always going to be positive. Looking at a couple examples, if you have a positive 4 multiplied by a positive 6, that's going to be positive 24. Or if you have something like a positive 8 multiplied by a positive 3, that's also going to equal positive 24. So whenever you multiply 2 positives, you're always going to get a positive number. For number 2, we have a positive number multiplied by a negative number. This is never going to be positive. For example, if you're multiplying a positive number like 7 by a negative number like negative 2, 7 times 2 is 14, so 7 times the opposite of 2 is going to be the opposite of 14, or negative 14. All right, this is always going to be negative. And even in another scenario, if you're multiplying something like 3 times a negative 10, well, 3 times 10 is 30, so 3 times the opposite of 10 must be the opposite of 30. That would be negative 30. So a positive number multiplied by a negative number is never positive, or you can also say it's always negative. For number 3, we have a negative number multiplied by a positive number. Just like number 2, this statement is always going to be never positive. Just like a positive times a negative is going to equal a negative times a positive is also going to be negative, aka never positive. So, for example, we could say something like this. If we have negative 5 and we're going to multiply that by positive 6, well, 5 times 6 is 30, so the opposite of 5 times 6 is going to be the opposite of 30, or negative 30. Also, if we do something like this where we have negative 9 multiplied by 3, well, 9 times 3 is 27, so the opposite of 9 times 3 is going to be the opposite of 27. So whether you're multiplying a negative times a positive or a positive times a negative, we're always going to get a negative answer, or we're never going to get a positive answer. For number 4, we have a negative number multiplied by a negative number. This is always going to be positive. For example, if we have something like negative 4 multiplied by negative 5, well, we know 4 times 5 is equal to 20, but we have the opposite of 4 times the opposite of 5. So if we know that 4 times 5 is equal to 20, well, the opposite of 20 is still going to be 20. Okay. In another example, maybe we can say something like negative 2 multiplied by negative 12, right? So if 2 times 12 is 24, we have the opposite of 2 times the opposite of 12, so we're going to get the opposite of 24, which is still 24. So unlike adding and subtracting integers, when we're multiplying and dividing, we're either always going to be positive when we are multiplying a positive and a positive, or a negative and a negative, or we are never positive, or we can say we're negative. It's never going to be in that middle where we have sometimes, okay? It's always going to be always positive or never positive when we're multiplying integers or rational numbers. All right, let's try some practice problems together here. So for number 5, we're just going to multiply a positive 6 and a positive 3. That should equal positive 18. For number 6, we have a positive 5 and a negative 7, so 5 times 7 is 35. But we have one opposite sign, so it's going to be the opposite of 35, or negative 35. For number 7, we have negative 6 times 8. Well, 6 times 8 is 48, and we have the opposite of 6, so we're going to have the opposite of 48, or negative 48. For number 8, we have 7 times negative 5, so 7 times 5 is 35. Since we have one opposite sign or one negative sign, we get the opposite of 35, or negative 35. For number 9, we have negative 8 times negative 3. Well, 8 times 3 is equal to 24. And this is going to stay positive because we have the opposite of the opposite, which is just the original. For number 10, we have 2 times negative 6. Well, 2 times 6 is 12, but we have one opposite symbol, so we have the opposite of 12, which is really just negative 12. For number 11, we have 4 times 9, which is 36. And we have two opposite symbols, so we have the opposite of the opposite, so the opposite of 36 is just going to be a positive 36. For number 12, we have the negative 7 times 4. Well, 7 times 4 is 28. Well, we have one opposite symbol, so it's going to be the opposite of 28, or negative 28. For 13, we have 15 times negative 7. So if you don't know what 15 times 7 is, we can go ahead and write it on the side here. So 15 multiplied by 7. That's going to be, 35, carry the 3. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 3, that's going to be 10. So that's going to be 105, Okay, now we have one opposite symbol, so we're going to have the opposite of 105, or negative 105. For number 14, we have negative 8 times negative 14, so we're going to get a positive answer here just because we have two opposites. But if we're multiplying this 14 times 8, we have 4 times 8, which is 32, carry the 3. 8 times 1 is 8 plus 3, which is going to be 11, so we're going to get 112 here. And we're going to have a positive 112 because the opposite of the opposite is positive in this case, right? For number 15, let's see, we have 17 times negative 6. So we have a positive times a negative here. So 17 times 6, just multiply their absolute values. 7 times 6 is 42, carry the 4. 6 times 1 is 6 plus 4 is going to be 10, so that's 102. And this is going to be negative 102 just because we have one opposite sign here. Okay. Moving on to number 16, we have negative 15 times 9. Well, let's see what 15 times 9 is. So 5 times 9 is going to be 45, carry the 4. 9 times 1 is 9 plus 4 is 13. So we're going to get 135. And this is going to be negative since we have one opposite sign. So we're going to get the opposite of 135, or negative 135. For number 17, we have a negative 17 times a negative 8. So let's ignore their signs for now and just say 17 times 8. Well, 8 times 7 is 56, carry the 5. 8 times 1 is 8 plus 5 is 13, so we have 136. And we have two negative signs, or two opposite signs, so the opposite of the opposite is just going to be a positive 136. For number 18, we have negative 9 multiplied by positive 16. So if we go ahead and multiply 16 by 9, then 9 times 6 is going to be 54, carry the 5. 9 times 1 is 9 plus the 5 is going to be 14. So we get 144. And because we have a negative times a positive, we're going to have one negative sign, or one opposite sign. For number 19, we have 17 times negative 6. So let's go ahead and multiply 17 by 6. Now 17 times 6, well, 7 times 6 is 42, carry the 4. 6 times 1 is going to be 6 plus 4 is going to be 10, so we have 102. Now we have a positive times a negative, so we have one opposite sign, so it's going to be negative 102. Finally, for number 20 here, we have 14 times 3, or negative 14 times negative 3. So if we go ahead and just multiply their absolute values, 3 times 4 is going to be 12, carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4, so that's 42. And so we have the opposite of the opposite, so that's just going to be a 42. Here's number 21. So we're multiplying 5.3 and 8 together, so let's go ahead and put the number with more digits on top, the number with less digits right underneath. Don't worry about lining up decimals. 3 times 8 is 24, put the 4, carry the 2. 8 times 5 is 40, plus 2 is going to be 42, so we have 42.4. And it looks like we have one decimal place, so we're going to put one decimal in our product here. So we're going to get 42.4. Okay. If we look at number 22, we actually have the same numbers, we just have a negative 8 instead, so it's the opposite of 8. So instead of positive 42.4, we're going to get the opposite of 42.4, or negative 42.4. Looking at number 23, we still have one opposite symbol, it's just on the 5.3 instead of the 8, so we're going to have the opposite of 42.4, or negative 42.4 again. And then if we move on to number 24, we have the same numbers one more time, except we have two opposites. So we have the opposite of 5.3 times the opposite of 8. That's going to be a positive 42.4, since the opposite of the opposite is just the original, or the positive version. Moving on to number 25 here, we have this negative 5.42 multiplied by 6.8. So again, let's just ignore the negatives for now and just multiply the numbers as they are, and then worry about the negatives afterwards. Okay, so 8 times 2 is going to be 16, carry the 1. 8 times 4 is 32, plus 1 is 33, carry the 3. 8 times 5 is 40, plus the 3 is going to be 43. Done with this 8, 1, and 3, we need a placeholder here, okay? 6 times 2 is 12, carry the 1. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 1 is 25, carry the 2. 6 times 5 is going to be 30, plus the 2 is going to be 32. If we go ahead and add these two rows together, we have a 6, a 5, an 8, and a 6, and a 3. And it looks like we should have 3 decimal places based on our factors up there. So we should end up having a 36.856. And notice how we have one negative in our answer, one opposite symbol. So this should be a negative 36.856. All right, here's number 26. For For number 26, we have negative 3.8 times a negative 7.38. A negative times a negative should always be positive, so we're going to get a positive answer here. But let's go to multiply 7.38. Let's multiply that by a 3.8. Again, don't line up the decimals. Just go ahead and line up their digits, and we'll deal with the decimals afterwards. 8 times 8 is going to be 64. Carry the 6. 8 times 3 is 24, plus the 6 is going to be 30, so 0, and then carry the 3. And then 8 times 7 is 56, plus the 3 is going to be 59. Okay, done with this 8, done with the 6, done with the 3. We're going to put a placeholder here and then keep on going. 3 times 8 is going to be 24, carry the 2. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11, carry the 1. 3 times 7 is 21, plus 1 is 22. If we go ahead and add these two together, 4 plus nothing is 4. 0 plus 4 is 4. 9 plus 1 is going to be 10, carry the 1. 1 plus 5 plus 2 is 8, and then we have a 2. And it looks like we have 3 decimal places from our factor, so 28.044 should be our product here. And that should be a positive because we have 2 negatives, so the opposite of the opposite should be positive in this case, so 28.044. All right, for number 27, now we're multiplying some fractions. So we have negative 5 over 24 times this negative 18 over 10. Since it's a negative fraction times a negative fraction, we're going to get a positive answer because a negative times a negative is always positive. Okay, so if we go ahead and break these numbers down, let's go ahead and write one fraction bar here. So writing one fraction bar, let's go ahead and see if we can break the numbers down. So this 5 here is just going to stay as a 5. And then if we break this 18 down, think about 18's prime factorization, it would be 2 times 3 times 3. So 2 times 3 times 3, that's 18. For this 24 here, that's going to break down into 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. Feel free to go ahead and write out a tree if you need to. Okay, that's for 24. And then for this 10 here, that's going to be a 2 times 5. So 2 and a 5. Okay, at this point, we're going to see what kind of common factors we have on the top and the bottom. So 5 and 5, that's a common factor. 2 and 2 is a common factor. So we know 10 is a common factor. Looks like 3 and 3 is a common factor. So it looks like 30 was their GCF. Okay. If we divide top and bottom by 30, we end up with a 3 in the numerator. And on the denominator, it looks like we have this 2 times 2 times 2, which is going to be 8. So we're going to get 3/8 here. Okay, so if we multiply here, our answer is going to be 3/8, and it's going to be positive because we had 2 opposite signs or 2 negatives, which multiply to get a positive. Okay, moving on to number 28, we have this positive 2 1/7 multiplied by this negative 14/25. So if we go ahead and turn this mixed number 2 1/7 into an improper fraction, 2 times 7 is 14 plus 1 is going to be 15. So rewriting this using one fraction bar here, we can say this is going to be 15 over 7, and we're multiplying this by, what do we have, 14 over 25, so we have 14 over 25. Okay, now let's go ahead and see if we can break this down now. So if we take this 15 can break into 3 times 5, okay, and then this 14 can break into 2 times 7. This 7 on the bottom is already prime, so it can't be broken down, leave that alone. And then 25 can be broken down into 5 times 5. Okay, so we can go ahead and cross cancel here a 5 and a 5, that's a common factor, and then a 7 and a 7 is a common factor. Okay, I think that's it. So we can go ahead and multiply this 3 and 2 together. That's going to get a 6 for the numerator, and on the bottom or the denominator we just have a 5, so we're going to get 6/5. So we can leave it as a mixed number if we'd like to here. This is going to be a mixed number improper fraction is going to be negative 6/5. Okay, just because we had a positive times a negative, or we could also write negative 1 and 1/5 if you wanted to write the mixed number. Alrighty, for number 29, we have a mixed number multiplied by a fraction. So we have negative 1 8/10 multiplied by negative 15/27. Because we have these two negatives here, we're going to multiply and get a positive product here. Okay, but let's worry about that in just a moment. So let's turn this 1 8/10 into an improper fraction first. So 1 times 10 is 10, plus this 8 is going to be 18. So if we rewrite this, we're going to get 18 over 10 for that first fraction, and we're going to get 15 and 27 for that second fraction. All right. Now 18, if we break it down, is going to be 2 times 3 times 3. Let's go ahead and leave some space here. So we have 2 times 3 times 3, and this 15 is going to break into 3 times 5. This 10 down here is going to break into 2 times 5. And then this 27 can break down into 3 times 3 times 3. All right, crossing out some common factors here. This 5 and 5 can cancel out. This 3 and 3 can cancel out. This 3 and 3 can cancel out. This 3 and 3 can cancel out. And these 2 and 2, these 2 and 2s can also cancel out here. If everything cancels out, then we know we have a 1 over 1, or our answer here is just going to be 1. So our product here is going to be positive 1. Since we had a negative times a negative, we should get a positive answer. Turns out these are reciprocals of each other. For number 30, we have this negative 3 and 3/8 multiplied by 12 45ths. Let's go ahead and turn this mixed number into an improper fraction. So 3 times 8 is 24. 24 plus the 3 on top is going to be 27. So let's go ahead and write this out. We're going to be getting a 27 on top and an 8 on bottom. And we're going to multiply by a 12 on top and a 45 on bottom. Okay, now let's see if we can go ahead and break these numbers down a little bit more here. So for 27, that's the same thing as 3 times 3 times 3. Go ahead and write those out. For 12, we have 2 times 2 times 3. So I'm going to write times 2 times 2 times 3. This 8 on the bottom breaks down into 2 times 2 times 2. And then this 45 will break down into 3 times 3 times 5. Okay, so seeing what we can cancel out here, looks like a 3 and a 3 we can cancel out, another 3 and another 3, a 2 and a 2, and another 2 and a 2. At this point, I don't see anything else, so 3 times 3 on top, that's going to equal 9. And in the denominator here, 2 times 5 is going to equal 10. So we're going to get a product here of 9/10, but now we should think about what our sign should be. We had one negative, so if we had the opposite times a regular number, we should get the opposite for the product. So we have negative 9/10 for our answer. So there you have 30 different practice problems with multiplying integers and rational numbers. If you think about where we started from here, keep in mind that whenever we multiply positives and negatives, if they're both the same sign, you will always get a positive product. And if they're different signs, then you're always going to get a negative product, or never positive, right? It's going to be negative. Here we just multiplied some integers. Again, just multiply the numbers, ignore the negatives, and then afterwards ask yourself how many times do you see an opposite symbol. So if you see an even number of negatives, then the answer is always positive. And if you have an odd number of negatives, it's always going to be negative. Okay. Then moving on to 21 through 30, we had some decimals and fractions. Just multiply the decimals and the fractions as you normally would. And again, look at how many negatives there are, or opposite signs. If you see only one negative sign in the problem, the answer has to be negative. If you see two of these opposite or negative signs, then you're going to get a positive answer. And also, if you see an even number of negatives in the problem, you will end up getting a positive, and an odd number, you will get a negative product. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And as always, keep up the great work, and I'll see you in the next one.